James Fletcher, your host, and we've got plenty to get into this week. Obviously, the last 7 days of college basketball, or somewhere around there, have been about as chaotic as it can get. Upsets from top to bottom all over college basketball. It resulted in a new AP poll, which had plenty of changes. It resulted in a new bracketology update, which I published at On3, which had a lot of shifting up and down the board. But each week on Tuesday, every other week throughout the season, I take your questions because obviously I'm following along, and for our normal show, which comes out every Thursday at noon Eastern, I kind of pick the topics that are interesting me across college basketball. We talk about those in the first two segments, usually one that's more related to results and then one that's a little bit more storyline driven, but it varies from week to week depending on what all is happening. Then we get you the games of the week. And the point of doing this show every other week is to get you guys involved. What is it that you guys are looking for that maybe I didn't touch on during the show? It's not being talked about as much across kind of the college basketball landscape. And even if it is, to take a little bit deeper dive here during this 20-30 minutes that we have on this show. So today we've got three questions to answer for you. First, Ace Bailey, question mark. That's the whole question. But we will talk about his recent form starting to kind of turn around. A lot of people were down on him. I'll talk about kind of the mock draft community, their opinions on Ace Bailey, talk about where he stands now, what I think his trajectory is for the rest of the season, and into NBA draft talk as well. Then we'll talk about UCF, their bubble case. Can they make the NCAA tournament? I mentioned that I just published a bracketology update. UCF in the mix. They're on the bubble right now on the wrong side for me. I know others have them in the field, but for me, still on the wrong side of the bubble. We'll talk about their case a little bit later on in this show and wrap things up with John Calipari. The comments that were made surrounding him from some anonymous coaches that kind of came out, sparked some controversy. We'll get into a little bit of that and what it means for him, what it means for college basketball, that this kind of stuff is out and about there. Not good for sure. But we'll start off the show with Ace Bailey, who, of course, has been about as polarizing of a figure as you can get in NBA draft talk circles. In 17 games this season, he is averaging 19.9 points, 7.9 rebounds, and just under 1 assist per game. His shooting splits, which is always important, 48.4 from the field, 39.3 from three, 60.6 from the free throw line. So he has not shot the ball well from there. Of course, his skills at his size, the ability to score from all levels is incredibly impressive and is what has kind of vaulted him into this conversation for a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. But as he struggled with efficiency through the early parts of the season, as he struggled to play alongside and I think kind of find his role next to Dylan Harper, who is a fellow future NBA star, another guy who's going to be taken in the top 5 of the NBA draft this coming cycle, there started to be questions raised about not just his ability on the court, but the winning mentality, the kind of makeup of him. And I think a lot of that is generally unfair to talk about many NBA draft prospects. Like there's ones here and there that you just hear over and over that it's not going to work. Ace Bailey is not one of those guys. Seems to be a good kid from everything you hear about him off the court. Like there's no red flag out there that people are pointing to saying this is why he's going to fail at the next level. But it's true that he plays a generally less efficient game than you would probably like, and that his performances have not always translated into wins. So what do you make of that? One, you have to look at Rutgers, the roster that they have, really no center in sight who's capable of playing at this level that they want to play at. And so, yes, it has largely been Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper doing everything they can. No shooters really on the perimeter to spread the floor. And so the lane has gotten clogged for both of them. And I think the other issue that you've seen is that early in the season, Ace Bailey was not healthy. So it was the Dylan Harper show. Well, then you get some struggling as they kind of try to figure out how to play off of each other. Well, now Dylan Harper dealing with some injury, some illness, some different things over the past month or two. And now Ace Bailey has kind of tried to take over the show. And so there's a just a weird dynamic that's going on there where they can't really get things fully figured out in that program. It has not been what we wanted it to be. But over these last 3 games, I think, and you can go back a little bit further than that because here's the deal. Ace Bailey has never had like bad, bad stats. I think he has 1 game all season in single digit scoring. So look, it's all relative. But, while he scored 39 points in a game earlier this season, he did it on 29 shots um, with 8 free throws, only going 3 of 8 from the free throw line in that game. So easily could have been a 40-point performance. That also came in a loss. So it's a struggle. What do you do with that? Again, his most recent performance puts up 30 points, 4 for 5 from 3 on 15 shots. Much more efficient to get to 30 points like that. One of the most efficient games we've seen in college basketball all season, goes 13 of 15 from the field. But he did not attempt a free throw. A lot of jump shooting. And look, when his shot is on, he is one of the best shooters we have seen in college basketball in quite some time. So what do you make of his draft stock? Man, it's a little bit hard to gauge because I think he, more than anyone at the top of this draft, I think with Cooper Flagg, we talk about him as kind of the consensus number 1 right now. I think he can pretty much slot in anywhere because he can play the 3 or the 4, I think, pretty comfortably. He's got the defensive versatility where he can take on some bigger matchups. He can take on some guys that are a little bit more on the perimeter if needed, depending on who he's playing alongside. I think he's got some versatility in his offensive game. He can play off the ball. He can take the ball in his hands when he needs to, as he's shown more recently here with Duke. Dylan Harper, of course, is a point guard who's going to do a little bit of everything. He's got the size to take on bigger matchups on the defensive end if they need to hide, maybe a shooting guard, a small forward. Defensively, I think he's got a lot of versatility as well and who you can play him alongside. Yakachonis, the ultimate, can play next to anybody type of guard. He can play the 2, play the 1. He rebounds really well for a guard. But then you look at Ace Bailey, and he's going to need to be on a team where he can put up shots because that is his game ultimately. I think he's going to need to be next to a couple of good on-ball defenders. It would help, obviously, if he had a center behind him who was a little bit of an eraser, a guy who can clean up some of the mistakes. Now, I'm not saying you just bail him out every time because that's still going to get exposed throughout the course of a game, throughout the course of a season, and, of course, a career. But it can aid in what you're having to do. You can focus on making sure when you're the off-ball defender, you're not letting him get to this one spot rather than worrying about this guy who, whatever level of scorer he is in the NBA, can get by you and get to different spots. So I think who he plays with is going to be important. So what does that mean for his draft stock? Well, it could mean nothing. Ultimately, the team who picks number 2, number 3, number 4 overall could have a slot that they feel he fills. And I think more likely than not, that's going to be the case. I don't see Ace Bailey sliding significantly at all in this draft. I know some people have compared him a little bit to Michael Porter Jr. with kind of the volume shooting, even though it's not a lot of creation. It's kind of just getting a shot up. I don't mind that comp, but I think that what people forget about the Michael Porter Jr. draft is that he was going to be the number 1 pick until he had injuries. Ace Bailey has no injuries like that. Like Michael Porter Jr.'s ceiling was very high. Ace Bailey still is. And while Michael Porter Jr., yes, slid down the board, that had to do with back surgery. If Ace Bailey does not have any of those kinds of problems, he's still going to be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. I think with some of his recent performances, the efficiency that he's shown, he's back up in the conversation to go second or third. We have seen some of these other guys struggle as well. That obviously plays a role. Dylan Harper, as I said, has been dealing with a couple little things, just hasn't had that early season punch. Also, kind of the freshman wall that we talk about. That's what we're going to talk about here in just a moment with other guys. Yakachonis had probably his worst performance possibly ever. Fouls out in very little minutes. Did not do much of anything on offense or defense or any area of the game because he was sitting on the bench for most of that one with foul trouble when he wasn't out on the court committing fouls. Yegor Dimon, we've talked about him, the step up in competition, in the Big 12. He has struggled. He's starting to fall down draft boards. VJ Edgecombe has been hit or miss all season. Trey Johnson, obviously similar to the Ace Bailey conversation, people talk to you about efficiency. They talk to you about the scoring role. Who does he actually fit next to? And with Bailey's other intangibles, I don't see him ever like falling below Johnson in the NBA draft conversation, pretty much regardless of outcomes the rest of this year. So as we kind of come to these conclusions, I don't think his draft stock shifts much. If anything, it has gone up over these couple of games because we've seen the efficiency there. But look, everyone in the NBA is well aware of what he is as a scorer. It's going to be whether they can fit him into a role on their team. That's going to be the conversation surrounding Ace Bailey for the rest of his career, really, until he either achieves it or you start to see the issues pop up more as you go along. Now, as we continue forward here, the next question that we're going to address is UCF's bubble case. What should we make of the Knights and what's going on there in Orlando? Johnny Dawkins has this team. We talked about them in the preseason. I was very fascinated by this group because it really is almost a last chance use sort of roster with Dior Johnson on it, Mikey Williams. You bring in transfers from various different places, get them in the mix, and you're going to just run it back. It really felt like this was Johnny Dawkins saying, look, I know that I'm facing pressure. I have got to have a good season here. And he determined that he was going to go out with as much talent on the roster as he could. Now, we look at their resume to this point. 3 quad 1 wins. They do have 4 quad 1 losses. They're 0-1 in quad 2, which is not great, but 9-0 in quad 3 and 4. So there's no big demerit on their resume to this point. That quad 2 loss, it came against LSU. Now it was a that one was a neutral site matchup. So they would need LSU to climb up into the top 50 to erase that one, make it quad 1. Don't see that particularly happening. Look, if LSU gets red hot in the SEC, they definitely will climb that many spots, but we know the level of competition. We've talked about what that schedule, that gauntlet looks like that they would have to face to make that type of rise through the net rankings. Elsewhere on their schedule, though, they do have their quad 1 wins. Those 3 come against Texas A&M, which is a big one. I mean, that one is not flipping no matter what. Texas Tech, another one. Don't see that one flipping at all. Arizona State, now that one, it was a road game, and so that one has to stay in this top 75. I do think right now it will stay in that range, but that one's not a guarantee because Arizona State is a fellow team that I have right now on the wrong side of the bubble. Now, those quad 1 losses, who do those come against? Because that's important as well. Wisconsin, not a bad one, particularly a neutral site there. A home loss against Kansas, not going to knock them too hard for that. A road game against Arizona, not going to knock them too hard for that. And a home game against Houston. So nothing that's going to kill them. But here's the issue. You've got to start picking up some more of these. You've got to have more quad 1 and quad 2 wins if you're going to get this done. Now, the good news is they only play 2 games the rest of the way that are not quad 1 or quad 2, at least as of today. Those come late in the season against Kansas State and Oklahoma State, both of those at home. So if we assume that they can stay out of the red there, if they can pick up wins in those two games, now it becomes, what can you do? What can you do to improve this resume a little bit more? Because your computer numbers are not great. They're 73rd in the net. Like, I just don't see a team 73rd in the net making the NCAA tournament field. You're going to have to get your computer numbers up along the way here as you continue playing. Kimpom, they're 70th. T rank 74th at Bart Torvik. Like, the numbers just aren't there. Now, their wins above bubble, 31st. So they are performing well here. So it's all about improving those computer numbers. That's going to be the key, I think, for them throughout the rest of this season. And, there's opportunities. Look, they play Iowa State 2 more times. They've got Kansas again on the schedule. Can they pull out one of those? That one would surely raise their schedule quite a bit if they can get one of those. But I think it's really going to come right down to the wire here for this program. They're 12-5 now, 3-3 in the conference. I don't know if I can put a number on what their record has to be, because I do think it matters what games it is that they win or lose. But right now, 3 different players averaging in double digits. You've got Keyshawn Hall, Darius Johnson, Jordan Ivy Curry. A player that I'm a really big fan of, and I think is a player to watch in the 2026 NBA draft cycle, Mustafa Tiam. Right now averaging 8 points, 5 rebounds, but he is a defensive, just an absolute eraser. He's the kind of guy that we're talking about playing that rim protection role who can have a big impact. 7'2", freshman. Look, as he fills out more, as he, just learns the defensive structure a little bit more, he is going to be an absolute force in the middle of that lane for UCF next season. So a lot to like about this team, a lot of kind of question marks that they've started to answer along the way, and we'll see if they can continue to do that throughout the rest of the season. Now, as we close out the show today, we do have to talk about John Calipari. Some interesting comments coming out over the last 24 hours or so. Opposing coaches essentially not respecting him anymore. They're not afraid when they look at the other sideline. He's washed up, archaic system, all the different quotes that you can pull, the flashy things you can say. Look, here's the deal. He still has yet to win an SEC game at Arkansas, and every press conference, there's a reason why. It's been shoot around. It's the rotation. It's injuries. Look, I talked about it last show. The deflection, I get it. He's got the right mentality at heart. Like, he's trying to protect the players, and he's turned things around before. But it's looking pretty grim right now. And as you look around, you think, what's going to change? Because this is what it looked like at Kentucky. Like, it's a little bit worse than what it was at Kentucky, because he doesn't have quite the level of freshman talent. And that's another thing. Like, if you were ever hoping that John Calipari was going to fully embrace the new method of bring in some veteran guys to fill out the roster, bring in a couple of freshmen to be one and dones, maybe 1 or 2 more who you think have a longer track to kind of go down and build your team that way. I don't think this year has done anything to convince him that it's a good way to build a roster. So does he go back to trying to build a team of freshmen? But it's going to be hard to do that next year, because the way the recruiting cycle works, like, a lot of those guys are kind of already taken. Now, he has a couple of them already in the fold, but I really just don't know, other than landing like generational talents and being able to coach them. there wasn't a lot in that those anonymous quotes that you look at and you go, okay, well, that's just hating. Like, that's just wrong. Look, he's coaching a different way than pretty much anyone else who is succeeding in college basketball right now. And he has not had much success lately. There hasn't been a whole lot of adaptation. Like, just look at John L. Davis at Arkansas. I mean, this is a guy who has torn up college basketball for multiple years now, and he just cannot get anything going. And there has not really been like this drastic change to try to help him out, to try to aid whatever it is that's going on, at least visibly out on the court during games. So I really don't know where they go from here. Like, it's a long-term commitment. There's no just backing out of this now. They're going to have to, I assume, some staff restructuring, excuse me, but Calipari's a loyal guy. Like, he's not looking to fire these guys who have been with him on the sideline for a while now. Yeah, it's, I don't know where it goes from here, really. But it will definitely be one of the top stories in college basketball to watch for, like I said, quite a while, because this is not something that's ending just one year and done, 2 years and done. Like, this is a long-term commitment. And look, I have no doubt they're going to invest in trying to get this figured out, trying to get it fixed in the near and long-term future at Arkansas. We'll be back on Thursday with plenty more college basketball coverage right here on Three True Values. Thanks for tuning in.